Hello, beautiful people. In today's podcast, we are going to host Julie Harrigan, CEO, founder of Physician EHR Solutions. Physician EHR Solutions is an advisory service for hospitals, healthcare systems, and outpatient practices that specializes in provider workflow, clinical improvements, and EHR implementation. In this podcast, we are going to touch upon the topics of technology for making life easy for physicians, using technology, integrating it with workflows, and how AI can change the landscape of technology for physicians. Hello, Julie. How are you today?
Hi, Ayush. I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad since we are having this podcast because your background is so unique from a physician to someone who is helping other physicians be empowered with more technology and information. So why not you do a quick introduction about yourself, Julie, and where did you it all started, and then talking more about the present day, what does your company do?
Absolutely. Dr. Julie Harrigan, I am a experienced hospitalist. I got into medicine out of prep school back in 1997 and did my first my medical school in Mexico at the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara. And then from there, graduated from a year and a half of residency and came to the United States thereafter. One of the purposes for me coming to the United States was to really practice more evidence-based medicine. And that kind of launched my career into, oddly enough, clinical informatics, which was not something that I had planned on initially. My second residency was in family medicine at UNM in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and where I live currently. I became a hospitalist in 2009, only because I didn't want to be on call anymore, and clinic didn't seem like a great option as far as outpatient practice, and practiced as a full-time hospitalist really ever since. I came into the clinical informatics world, though, just really happenstance. We had implemented a new electronic health record very shortly after I got out of residency and started working as a hospitalist. And understanding a lot about programming just intuitively, it's always come very natural to me. I really understood what the good, bad, and the ugly and how to fix it. And so, being the opinionated person that I am, I immediately started complaining, but then providing viable solutions to our healthcare IT crew at that time. And very shortly after, I'm pretty sure they were tired of me complaining incessantly, they hired me on as a consultant. I thereafter proceeded to help the hospital system, which is Ardent Healthcare Services, which is now a 30 hospital company, implement their first 12 standardized electronic health records in New Mexico and Oklahoma. From there, was hired as their chief medical informatics officer, implementing and standardizing a 30 hospital system once we went live with all 30 hospitals, and really standardizing care throughout that hospital system. When I departed from them about a little bit over 5 years later, I went on to I did my own LLC, so Physician EHR Solutions, was immediately hired to help implement an electronic health record system and standardize the system for RWJ Barnabas Rutgers in New Jersey, so multi-hospital system. And now I've moved on to Corewell Health, which is, again, large hospital system, 22 hospitals, over 5,500 beds, to consolidate their EHR and then standardize their system as well for, with regards to policies, physician workflows, practice standardization, regulatory, and all of that. So it's been quite a journey over the last now 14 years that I've been in clinical informatics, and I've very much enjoyed it.
Great. Super awesome. I think that has been a great journey of great determination and possibly welcoming any new opportunities that came your way. And that's something, anybody who's building a career should be learning. Like, you should be open with anything that comes. So tell us more, more specifically about your day-to-day work, because I understand that Physician EHR Solutions is more of a consulting company now, helping the different hospitals and healthcare systems in their workflow management, clinical improvement. So go deeper into it, like how does, this whole consulting works and what kind of results you have been able to drive. Especially if you can explain with an example, it would be great.
Absolutely. So I primarily work in the executive C-suite space. So I work directly with CMOs and chief operating officers to ensure that everything that goes into their electronic health record implementation also is operationally viable, cost effective, and then consensus driven and very much evidence-based driven. There are national and international standards of care that every hospital system really should adhere to. We don't want to kill the art of medicine, but reducing variability in practice, not only reduces provider burden, but it can bolster educational and academic centers, decrease cost variability, and improve reimbursement even by payers, if you do it in the correct manner. And so on a day-to-day basis, I'm riddled with meetings, and anything from policy meetings to operational meetings to budgetary meetings to see, how we can more cost effectively implement these things and then translate them into day-to-day clinical practice for the improvement of care of our patients, and then to also reduce provider and clinician burden. I guess one of my favorite examples of how healthcare standardization can be very effective in a healthcare system was during COVID. Here I was, the CMIO for Ardent. We have 30 hospitals, and all 30 hospitals over the past 3.5 years, we had been working on implementing our electronic health record, which is Epic at this time, and then standardizing those practices down to, again, policies for each hospital into one organized fashion under the Ardent umbrella. And what it resulted in was this great collaboration between the hospitals, because we had hospitals in New Jersey that were absolutely overwhelmed with COVID patients, just as New York was. And we had hospitals in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and in Ohio, or Idaho, rather, I'm sorry, that were not as burdened, at least at that time when everything was exploding on the East Coast. And we were able to take providers and nurses, send them to those hospitals in New Jersey, and all they had to do was take a tour of the hospital, get their badges, and they were able to immediately badge into their computers and start working because everything was standardized at that time. So we had a unified way of working, which all the way down to things like provider order sets, to help with patient care. And so it really made it a no-brainer for those providers to cross state lines, go all the way across the United States, and pick up where they left off, just with a different subset of patients. And it really goes to show how consolidating those practices and having best evidence-based and consensus-based practice can help again reduce that variability of practice, improve cost effectiveness, and really increase efficiency across the board.
Right. No, fantastic, actually, because I believe, processes definitely help. I've always believed. In fact, there was this incident of Japan Airlines evacuation, like about a couple of weeks back, if you would have noticed that news. And, just because of the good training and the processes that were in place, they were able to evacuate close to 375 passengers unharmed within 18 minutes, and with half of the aeroplane, already engulfing in fire and stuff. So, like people say it a lucky thing, but it was all due to, all the workflows and the processes, the training that was already in place. So it was a really good case study showing how much, doing those foundations strong can lead up to better results in the especially the critical scheme of things.
Absolutely. And it contributes to that high reliability organization, right?
Yeah, that's the
do
word.
it right first time, and you get it right, you're going to do it right the second and third time. So I think, yeah, exactly to your point.
Right. So here's a counter question to it. So, in your practice, since you're dealing with the stakeholders all the time. And, like we discussed, is so much useful and critical. But what are the biggest obstacles in embracing, such a change, especially when it comes to technology? If you would like to talk about the technology viewpoint, but as well as overall workflows and business processes. So, what has been the biggest obstacles, and what would be your advice to health systems?
So I think some of the biggest obstacles to embracing technology in healthcare systems are, certainly cost, and the decisions that are made. I think that we're going towards a culture of more consolidated, large electronic health record systems, as opposed to, all of these multiple kind of mom and pop and homegrown systems. But, cost certainly factors into that. And I think one of the hurdles to being able to embrace technology and then decide what third-party technologies thereafter, that you integrate into, your base system, is the fact that, and again, COVID was a pivotal time in, in healthcare, especially in the United States, where healthcare systems are struggling with things like reimbursement. They're struggling with things like denials from payer organizations, because they're having to jump through many hoops. And so that reduces their capital budget to be able to, and operational budget to be able to purchase these technologies. So I think that's definitely one huge hurdle. The other is honestly lack of end user feedback and end user utilization of the electronic health records. There's so much burden for documentation requirements at this time. Again, not understanding how it is in Europe and in other countries as much, but knowing how it is in the United States. There's so much burden being placed on the clinician and on the physician, and I'm sorry about my dogs, to, have these documentation, on and present it to things like payers on a silver platter, and then also take care of their patients in the meantime. So there's so much busy work going on that you have a lot of pushback from your providers. I think a couple things that come to mind as far as solutions for hospitals and healthcare systems to get rid of those obstacles, or at least move the obstacles aside or reduce them. One is, if we could reduce some of that variability in practice, decrease costs of care, not ordering unnecessary testing and things like that, certainly improves the hospital reimbursement and decreases the cost of care. Utilizing some third-party systems that we can utilize as well to decrease denial rates. Things like point of care documentation for physicians, so that healthcare companies can't come back and deny patient stays, based on either their patient class and things, which is a huge reimbursement factor for the hospitals, and then obviously improves both their operational budget and their capital budget. Increasing physician buy-in, really. Consensus is a great thing in medicine. And, you have your evidence-based practice, you can have all the guidelines you want, but if you present those to the physician, at the end of the day, they still, aren't going to want to use them if they have their own opinions about how to practice. And so take those subject matter experts, involve them in the process of making those changes within your healthcare organization. You'll increase the buy-in. Word of mouth is better than any commercial you could ever present to them. And it really increases the utilization of the electronic health record, and then helps to really bolster its utilization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rightly said. This episode of Healthtech with Purpose podcast is brought to you by MindBowser, a product engineering and digital transformation company focused on health. At MindBowser, we enable health companies to build the future of health, where accessible, equitable, and patient care.
We strongly believe that technology can empower a healthier world, and that's why we are partnering with healthcare experts like yours to make it happen.
Hi guys, thanks for listening to Healthtech with Purpose. Make sure to subscribe us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube for more expert insights on industry innovation and transformation. And remember, share the knowledge.
So, Julie, tell me about this, that, there has been a big talk about AI. In fact, last year, pretty much has gone into, all about AI. I was at few conferences last year, and I could see every company pretty much AI for X, AI for Y, AI for Z, and everything. You would be a great person to answer this question. Like, what is the reality currently on the ground? So, since you see both worlds, both from the technology viewpoint as well as from the health viewpoint, so how much has the reality changed? One, on the present day, and second, in the future, what do you plan?
So that's a great question. There's so much swirling in the world of artificial intelligence at this point. I've been listening to podcasts and watching, debates on, from the giants of the AI world and the creators really of the AI world, debating the good, bad, and the ugly of AI. Are we going to, end up, in the Terminator world where robots are, ruling our lives and we're the slaves to them? And is this going to be the ultimate end of humanity? I think that's certainly debatable, but an interesting subject nonetheless. AI is really changing the landscape of a great many things, limited, not really limited to healthcare, but in all facets of our lives at this point. Chat GPT, revolutionized, even essay writing in schools, so it's gotten very interesting. I think our biggest issue with AI, and not really an issue, but just something that we need to be conscientious about as healthcare systems, is how we adopt AI, how it's utilized, and making sure that it's not taking the subjectivity and the art of medicine out of our hospitals. Some of it, predictive analytics, for example, is a great example of how we can really utilize this to bolster our efforts in detecting things like early sepsis and coronary diseases and lung cancers and such. But we still need that touch and feel of a human-to-human contact that is very necessary for making those, clinical decisions. So adaptation of AI, though, for things like bolstering our electronic health records, some of that predictive analytics, and then utilizing AI to help make those decisions or guide clinicians as to, how they should treat patients, for example, in algorithmic fashion. Things like, just simple note writing, techniques and consolidation can be very useful for the average clinician, and even going above and beyond that. But again, being very conscientious of how we're utilizing that. And in the world that we live in, it's so easy for something to make decisions for us. And we need to make sure that we're educating our hospitals, healthcare systems, and our clinicians, moreover, to maintain that objectivity, maintain that subjectivity, make sure that they're still making decisions for themselves, but then utilizing that artificial intelligence as not a crutch, but a great suggestive help.
Well said. And I think in the non-clinical things, AI is already doing a good job, but it would be all about like how we can see the advent of AI in the clinical roles, basically, a perfect companion and the right companion for the doctors and the physicians. Which turns me to the point which you have been, which you have been always advocating from your past works. I've always seen you talked about the physician burden, like how we can make it lesser, the burnout for physicians. And do you think that AI could be that solution, and what we can do about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, most of the time spent by physicians at this point is at the computer. You see your patients for 5-10 minutes, you talk to their families, you go back to the computer and you work for 30 minutes on the same chart that you were just looking at. So a few things that I think can reduce provider burden. We need to empower physicians with more tech and make it much more palatable to them. Things like having it at your fingertips. Here's my phone. And there are a few healthcare EHR companies who are really empowering providers to utilize that technology at their fingertips and be able to provide care for their patients really kind of on the fly, so that you're not sitting down in front of a desk fighting for a computer, looking for a printer, doing all of that stuff, which just takes minutes out of, chunks of minutes out of your day, but then cumulatively it's really hours. And that's really contributing to a lot of provider burnout. I think one of the things that we can do is, again, going back, especially here in the United States, is push back on payers and, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and all of those institutions that really require, this silver platter, perfect, bullet pointed documentation on patients or in the patient electronic health record. It's burdening physicians. They're not teaching these things in medical school. They're not teaching these things in residency. They're teaching you to care for your patient, to do the right thing, to do no harm, to treat them appropriately, to maintain standards of care. But they're really not teaching to documentation requirements just to satisfy, those, what the payer documenters want, who are non-physicians, mind you. So they're clinicians at best, they might be nurses, but still they're not living in the physician mind. And so decreasing that burden of some of that documentation would be very, very helpful. I think also shift times, not necessarily in the tech world, but reducing the length of time that one needs to spend, rounding and in the hospital and such can reduce some of that burden, because at the end of the day, 12 hours is a really long day, even if you get a few days off. And then again, technology standpoint, putting it more at their fingertips, making it more accessible. If I could take my note and dictate it while I'm walking down the hallway, driving in my car, doing other things, and not being distracted necessarily, but understanding that will still complete that process very seamlessly. I think we can encourage electronic health record companies and other third-party vendors to help with solutions for that and incorporate AI into that realm as well to really help with those workflows.
Well said. Well said. I think it makes so much sense, and I think and I hope, in fact, if AI can really solve this problem, because it really harms providers, and if they can invest their time in what makes them the best, I think that helps everybody. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so Julie, closing notes, since this is the Health Tech with Purpose podcast, we always like to know about your purpose, of doing what you are doing. So would you like to share a bit on the personal side, what drives you and what has been your purpose of life?
Thank you. I think what really drives me is, I've been a patient in a hospital. My parents have been patients in the hospital. My children have been patients in the hospital. Most recently, my husband was a patient in the hospital. And I've seen healthcare go from on paper with, these huge binders that used to be so cumbersome and picking up charts, outside of the door of the patient's room, to now being completely, electronic, and going through not only my personal life, but in my professional life, and seeing the evolution of that, and then really seeing how there's so much variability in how we practice medicine, and from hospital to hospital, from physician to physician, from company to company, and healthcare system to healthcare system, and nationally, internationally. What drives me is the basic fundamentals of improving healthcare. It's not enough that there's some consensus-driven medicine in some healthcare systems. You have things like Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic who, seem to have a lot of their act together. But then you have other hospital systems that want to do that, but don't really know how to start that up, don't really know where even the pivot point is.
Exactly.
And so my driving purpose is to help those organizations that need that pivotal, organizational, motivational help them organize how they practice without compromising the art of medicine, certainly, because there's patients are variable, healthcare is variable, but help them do the right thing, as much as absolutely possible, improve patient care, improve the provider experience, reduce the cost of care, and practice medicine more efficiently, because we're getting older, sicker, there's more patients, everybody's, it's a mess. And if we can improve how we practice, ultimately, the system will work as intended. And I think that's really the driving force of what I do in healthcare information technology, is to help to bolster those efforts in coordination with our leadership and organizations.
Yeah, and I hope we'll get there bit by bit every day. So
I'm whittling away.
yeah, thank you so much, everybody. This is Julie Harrigan, MD, CEO, and founder of Physician EHR Solutions. Thank you so much, Julie, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Ayush.